On. Right, welcome back to Process the Podcast. Today we're joined by two guests, not just the one. So we've got Daunte Crawford and we've got Andy Hyde, both from athletic athletes. So they both own a company down in Manchester doing strength and conditioning for athletes, general public and footballers, I think you specialise in. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Excited to be on.
Yeah, no worries. So it'd be good to kind of hear your individual stories about kind of, first of all, how you've met each other, and then also kind of your background from school. I don't know if you played football, because it's the first time we're chatting. So just a little bit about your story. I'll let Daunte go first.
Okay, cool. So I'll tell my story from how me and Andy met. So me and Andy, I think I've probably known of Andy for probably 10 years before we even started doing our business. We kind of are from the same local area. We've played a lot of sport against each other over the coming years. And it's just a name that you recognise, it's a name that you know, and it's a face that you know. And then we go to the same gyms because we're in the same area, and you see people working out, and you kind of like what they're seeing, and you kind of like what they're doing. And I think we just had that kind of mutual respect. We weren't best of friends. We weren't really, I won't even call us friends at that point, but we just knew who we were, and we kind of had that mutual respect there, just from day one, really. And then obviously, probably as we go through the podcast, we'll be able to explain how that's managed to grow into what it is today. But for me, myself personally, my story is that always been a huge fan of sport. Sport's been my thing through school. It was always the thing that I was excelling at. I was always fast. I was always quite strong, quite physical. So naturally, sport was always something that I'd be able to excel in. And then all the way through primary school into high school, straight away, I was football captain, athletics captain, got lots of awards. So it managed to be my kind of cornerstone in school that kind of made me, I was kind of the sports person. Football was always the thing for me that I wanted to get my teeth sunk into. I remember it being in year 6 and the PE teacher telling me that I should take up athletics more because I was quite good at the hurdles, but I was like, no, what are you on about? For me, it's football only. Don't know whether I regret that decision or not. But basically, it was something that I was never naturally gifted at. It was something I definitely had to work at. But as I got to the age of, I'd say about 14, 15, 16, it really started to gain some traction. By the time I was 16, 17, I was kind of trialing out with a lot of, at the time, some professional clubs. I did have a couple of scouts come see me from pro clubs, but by the time I got to that 15, 16, I was kind of a late bloomer. I started football late, and I think I kind of bloomed late as well. What I was told is that they already handed out a lot of scholarships, so I was like, cool. Went down a non-league route. I managed to get on the books of Stockport. I was there for about a season and a half, 2 seasons with their academy, which was really, really good for me. Managed to play at a really good level. Didn't manage to progress further than that, but just before class of 92 got involved with Salford, I was there in their academy as well, which was just about to take off. And I managed to play season in their academy as well. But again, I started to fall a bit out of love with it, just due to the nature of football at that level. Wasn't really fitting into the locker room culture and things like that. And it got to this age where we're at, 16, 17, 18, where I wanted to start earning a bit of money. After college, I didn't go into university straight away. I took a bit of a gap. I was a bit tired of education. So I started to pick up work, and I ended up landing myself in a law firm, of all places, which was a bit of a change from really just going into sport and then going into that. And quickly, I started to see that within a corporate environment, I was able to excel quite well. And people were able to see that. So I managed to get, I think, 2 promotions whilst I was there. And as I got the 2 promotions, it got to the crunch time where they approached me to say, look, you can go in 2 directions here. You can continue to do what you're doing, but if you want to continue to progress, we need you to do like a qualification, which will take 3 or 4 years. And at that time, I was still training and things, and I kind of realised that it's not my true passion. It's not something that I want to be invested in that length of time into. So I picked up a PT qualification. It's around this time, about 2017, me and Andy got into contact again and got into touch, where then we started to just throw ideas about. What we started to realise quite quickly is that we run off the same kind of energy. We kind of align quite quick, and it was always probably from the start, just always set to be a good relationship. So we started to make aesthetic athletes. I think Andy's going to probably share a little bit more about that as we go on. But as we continued, we rented out a little bit of space where we charged for the hour. We started to get a couple of clients in. It continued to evolve as we started to understand what our true philosophy is. I think around 2018-17, I then went into Nuffield Health, based in Bolton, which then I managed just to get a bit more gym floor experience, because up to that point, it was just me by myself in a small unit. And I think you just need to be on the gym floor if you're going to be really, really good in personal training, being able to sell, being able to be present, being able to be around other trainers and pick up other ideas. And then AA's just kind of took off a little bit more from there. So we've come to this point now where, we've just recently launched our online exercise database, which is going to take us into our next transition. But so far, so good, really. We went to lockdown, so it's just being able to manage that properly. But that kind of wraps it up in a summary.
Yeah. No, it's good to see, because you've obviously, we talked about it briefly before we went on about transitioning out of football into real life. You've obviously done it really well, because you went from the football into your law firm, and then you kind of progressed up really quickly. So we'll touch on that later on. We'll let Andy tell his side of the story as well, but we'll come back to that. Go on, Andy.
Yeah, of course. So Daunte pretty much painted the perspective from both of our sides pretty well. From similar areas, so I won't go over that too much. We did play football against each other quite a lot, which is interesting, for school and for club. So there was always a big physical competition there, which was cool. But so again, I was similar to Daunte, played football, I did track as well. I actually did long distance as well as short distance, so I was a little bit of both. And I would say probably stem more from my dad. He was just always kind of a physical person. He was a boxer. Got his pro card. He used to do strongman. He used to do bodybuilding. So he kind of got me into the physical side of training as well as sport, which I always naturally taken to. It was just kind of a way to me to express myself. I always felt quite free and expressive when I was playing sport or training physically. So that's kind of where I got into the sport side of things naturally, and then more specifically down the route of kind of physical training and fitness. And then when I got to university, I was still playing sport, but I just kind of started to transition on to the kind of the science behind it, just because similar to Daunte, I weren't going to make it as a professional. I'd had a couple of trials at a couple of places, like shadow teams, but yeah, I just weren't going to cut it, as a lot of people that are coaches don't. So yeah, went into my exercise science degree at Leeds Beckett. And then after that, went straight into a master's in strength and conditioning. Had little bits of experience here and there during the degree, but nothing really too major, nothing too consistent. And then during the master's, just purely from networking, being proactive, kind of not networking in a typical sense of messaging people and asking for an internship, networking properly, adding value, being a nice person, consistently reaching out to people in person. Managed to gain an internship at Leeds United, and did a year there with the regional talent club. So that was like the ladies academy. So that's anywhere from like under 10s to under 16s. Worked specifically with goalkeepers during that time, which was interesting. And then that's kind of taken me on to where I am now. So coming out of the masters, very much struggled to get a job in the industry. I usually always have a plan, but I didn't really have a plan exiting my masters. But I'm always the kind of person that's a lot bit happy-go-lucky. It's a bit of a weird situation. After kind of about 6 months of persistence, managed to get 2 jobs at Science for Sport. Obviously, we had aesthetic athletes running on the side. And then we partnered up with Manchester Player Development, the football academy as well. And then just recently started a job in the NHS as a strength and conditioning coach as well. So they're all part-time roles, but yeah, got my hand dipped in a couple of.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got your hands full at a minute then. Busy man. Yeah. No, that's interesting, because it's the first time we've spoken. I'm a goalkeeper myself, so a bit my background, I played professional football for a number of years, but I was a goalkeeper. So what sort of work were you doing with the Leeds, the goalkeeping?
So when I was there was no model or system in place for the goalkeeper specifically, which is why they kind of wanted me to jump in on that task. And just because I was usually pretty creative with the way I delivered field-based work. Because I was only there for a year, it was a little bit annoying because it was kind of a year to get a grasp on what the goalkeepers were actually doing. It was a lot of work with the goalkeeper coach in kind of an MDT to go through like video analysis and then whatever kind of literature we could to determine what the goalkeepers were actually doing. One of the annoying things was that we were trying to develop like a testing battery specific to goalkeepers because they were just doing the generic testing battery outfield players would do. But even going through the literature and kind of working backwards from what they do in the field, we never really got around to that because I was only there for a year. But we did collect some like interesting GPS data on what they were doing on the field, and we made some pretty cool and useful conditioning drills for them based off what they were doing on the field and kind of using box dimensions and stuff like that. And just a lot of frontal plane work with them, really. Moving laterally, trying to the stuff that we were doing. I mean, because they were youth players, it was a lot of movement competency. So just making sure they moved well enough, so when they progressed on, to academies and exiting Leeds United, that coaches could see them and they'd move well. So we did a lot of frontal plane work with them in regards to movement competency and just kind of progressing them forward from there, really, and just trying to do our job to make it transfer as much as possible into like goalkeeper specific actions.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I'll have to speak to you after about that because I'm always interested, especially when I was at with professional teams. There wasn't really much specific stuff for keepers, like you said. It was just general, like, bit you do whatever the group would kind of do, and there isn't like you're expected to do. It's the old saying as well: goalkeepers should do the running with the outfielders, and I would always argue like, yes, there's that aspect of like they should do it just for the team bonding, kind of like you're all in it as a team. But like I think you need to have your own individual specific type of training. But you're interested.
There goalkeepers are usually like the tallest players on the pitch, usually the heaviest, usually the slowest. They get a lot of hand and wrist injuries. And they more so need upper body work, probably a little bit more than the outfield players. The outfield players still need it, for the collisions and the physical challenges in duels. I mean, I know it's not collisions like rugby, but they need it for kind of physical duels. But the goalkeepers need a lot of velocity-based work in terms of their upper body with kind of lower loads, for like the throws and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there is some small tweaks that you need to make and need to be mindful of.
Yeah, I know, because I remember when I was playing, like, we never used to do that much specific stuff. Like from my memory, we literally didn't do anything. And even like in training, the fitness related stuff was all the exact same with the outfielders. We'd never split off and have our own testing or our own kind of strength training stuff. But no, I'd be interested to talk about. But anyway, talking about your business, what was the idea? When did your idea about the business originally come from, and kind of how did you start? But I know you mentioned you kind of rented out a small space and stuff. So how did you initially get your clients in and slowly build the brand to what it is now?
Well, when we first started, it was word of mouth. It was just through creating enough buzz so that people knew what we were doing. And a lot of it just came through like a friend of a friend or something like that, just to be able to get us in. And then we hopefully just started to do as much of a good job as we could for them to be able to see the results, obviously, that we wanted, for them then to get other people in. So word of mouth, I still think to this day is the number one source of referral, as a trusted source of referral. But it blossomed and it really grew from something really, really small. Just a couple of ideas, as I say. It literally came from when I saw Andy in the gym, and we kind of just went, look, I like what you're doing. He liked what I was doing. Let's just try to see if we can maybe take something and use it. And it was just what we started off doing is just things that we saw at the time, and it was the things that we liked probably at the time, where that was just filming and posting content. It was nothing that was structured. It was nothing that was done with an end objective there. It was just us being able to come together, use the energy that we've got, and see if people liked it as well. And as we took it from that, obviously, then we started to see that, all right, we think we can maybe make some business out of it. We used it into going to training people and coaching people. And again, just through us having a good network, we managed to find a really nice space, which we're still used to this day, where we're able to get people in there and train, and it's cool, and it's nice, and it's quite modern. And, you know, that became our foundation really to grow. As we then looked to build the business, at this time, Andy was still based in Leeds. So it was difficult for us, maybe for the first year or so, to be able to really nail down what our true philosophies are, what our cornerstones are of the business. And, you know, when Andy was back in Manchester, we'd catch up and have a coffee, and we'd try and get ideas across. But it's hard to really action those when you can't put that full energy into the project. So as obviously Andy's time from university has reduced, then it's allowed us to be able to put more of our creative energy into how can we actually turn this into a business. And as we look to grow the business, there's a lot of mistakes that we've made early, but the benefit of the learning phase of this is that we were able to make those mistakes with small consequences so that we can learn for next time. And it's definitely advice that I'll give to anyone that's looking to start up who may not have initial business insight, is that I think you just got to learn and roll with it. Obviously, you don't want to be taking it too big of a hits too soon, but it's just kind of like the podcast, just trusting the process and being able to take it on, and growing with it, and being able to pick up ideas as you go forward. That network that we've got has took us into the current day, where we've managed to create relationships with coaches, where now we're working with teams across Manchester, working with clients across Manchester, where then working with those teams has managed to build then our general client base into, now we've got up to 30 clients that we're in touch with. And that's how I think slowly but surely you'll start to tick off those key objectives and bits and bobs that you initially wasn't anticipating, but over time they start to unravel themselves.
Yeah, 100%. It's good that you first said like you literally just both started because you liked what you two were doing, and you just started posting content because you enjoyed it, kind of thing. I think a lot of things, like especially for me, because I started my fitness page. I started that when I wasn't really pursuing a PT thing. I started doing it for enjoyment, and then you realize, like, first of all, like people are actually reacting to it and enjoying it, and then you're like, right, I'm enjoying doing this. I could turn this into like a career. I could turn this into a business. And I think when people do that, like the consistency and how their business progress just goes like it's a much higher level than, like, say you're starting something that, oh, I could make money from this, but I don't really enjoy it that much, kind of thing. Like it's
That's
a different level.
I think you get a lot of people who see something hot and they see something new and see something exciting and jump on board with it, but give it 6 months when they actually start to realize that this is actually not as easy as it probably looks, or that when you've got to be putting out content every single day and you've got to find those creativity and those ideas, or you've got to be getting up and, you know, especially as because it's a side thing for us at the moment, and it's part-time work still. We've still got our full times, and being able to try get energy when you've got those really long days and to go, even last year or start of this year, when it's literally snowing and it's hailstone outside, and you've still got to try and keep your energy. That's when it really, for me, tests if you've got the right passion for it. And if you're just doing it just because it's cool, if you're just doing it because it's fresh, you've got to enjoy what you do. Otherwise you're going to run out of steam very, very quick. The enthusiasm and the excitedness of starting something new will buzz out quick, and that's when you've got to really be on board with what your initial plan was.
Yeah, 100%. You got to stick to it, and like you said, like people go into things because, oh yeah, this looks great, but down the line that buzz will die off. Is exactly what you said. And I think talking about going out, like not every day I look outside, and if it's pouring out of rain, like I really don't want to, like, say for me, like go for a run, or I don't want to, like, if I feel a bit tired, I didn't sleep that well the night before, I don't want to sit down and like program people's stuff, or I don't want to go one-to-one PT today. Like, but if that's what you really truly want to do, you go and get yourself through it, like no matter what. Like there's just something that kind of like pushes you through it no matter what. So like, just when people are going to start new businesses and stuff, just really think, like, is your heart 100% there? And like you said, when you're doing it as a part-time job and you're working you're working 40 plus hours a week in a normal job anyway, like it's hard to kind of, first of all, find the time, and also they actually make it work. So how do you find the balance with full-time employment and kind of the whole side hustle sort of thing? How do you find it mentally and physically?
Well, for us, I think this is where we really thrive, because especially, again, Nuffield, I'm there full time. There's been days where I'm there 6 a.m. till 8 o'clock at night without going home. And that really can drain you out. And it's not healthy. It's definitely not healthy, but it's just part of the business, unfortunately, that we're in. And obviously, as we're doing this, we've still got the part-time business to run. And that's where, because there's two of us, it really, really helps balance that workload. So, for example, when I'm at Nuffield doing work and Andy can facilitate and vice versa, we've found a way to be able to communicate well and be able to take tasks on within each other. We are quite thorough in how we set out our philosophy and our business model, to the point where there's tasks that Andy will look at and I would need to kind of question him on it. I just know that he's doing it, and vice versa. So if something crops up that is a bit more admin-y, then that's mine to look at. If something comes up that's a bit more technical, then that's Andy's to look at. And that's how we can kind of run accordingly, where we can still put out good quality content. We can still maintain high quality service when it comes to delivering our product, but it's not compromised by just not having sufficient time. And we've also tried to be smart of our time as well, which is obviously why we've managed to create this a little bit of an online platform where, I mean, one of our things is that we can try to create systems as well that that save a lot of the time that we can put in. So a system is like the online coaching model. A system is being able to make a simple spreadsheet that's just being able to take out 30% or 30 minutes of your time that you don't necessarily have to throw around. You know, it's those small things that we've started to learn as we've picked up through things that really, really help us out through when time gets difficult.
It's how I would say, it's like working smart but not like hard. Like, you need to work hard, but if you're smart about it, it just makes it so much easier. And it's also helped there's two of you, so you can like half the workload. And I think a lot of people, when they start businesses, they want to do everything themselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you used to, like, you've obviously both got different attributes, and you can kind of bounce off each other. Like, there's an aspect, like you just said, that I might be better at, and then Andy might be better at the other half. And if you are on your own, having the ability to actually be able to reach out to other people. So say for me, like content creation, I might not be great at editing videos or whatever, reaching out to like an external source because they know that they're going to produce the highest quality product for you. Whereas if you try to do it, you could be doing God knows what. You could have like clip art here, there, and everywhere. Could be a disaster.
You could be there for an hour, 2 hours doing something that still comes out looking shoddy, whereas you can just give it to the guy to do, pay a little bit of money to do it, and then you can still put your energy and time into where your skill set is. And that's another thing that me and Andy have managed to do. I think we've got our skill sets so that they complement each other quite well. I think if you've gone into business with someone who's too similar to you, it's going to be conflict and clash, and that's kind of what you don't want to happen. I'm not saying that there's times where we don't clash, but I think this is where we've got the right energy and it works because we're able to conversate and we're able to articulate our ideas across properly. And the key thing about me and Andy is that if one of us disagrees with something, we don't get annoyed with it. We don't, our ego doesn't get involved, then start making personal, emotional decisions. Our both end goal is how can we make this business better? How can we then look to generate more money? How can we look to be able to fill our service to the best possible standard? And that's what the bottom rules are. If it's not ticking those boxes, then why are we having this conversation?
Exactly. It's good that you can kind of work with it well. I was going to ask Andy, what's Daunte like to work with? Is he as good as he's saying he is?
Yeah. Yeah,
or is he a nightmare? Does he do your hair secretly?
So I think if you've not worked with someone like Daunte before, you might get offended, or you might get butthurt, or you might think, why is he working like this? But it's just because you've probably not worked with someone so efficient. So like we just have a clear mutual understanding that it's either natural because you're both like that, or you either build it over time, which for us is a little bit of both. That if I message Daunte, ask him to do something, or he asks me to do something, all you need is just recognition of that, and then you can be confident it's been done. Or
Yeah.
like if you're talking about something, you know, don't talk to talk, you know, listen. Don't talk more than you need to talk, you know, keep things concise. Don't be condescending, don't be patronizing. I mean, it's just, it's stuff that just makes, again, it makes our communication and everything we do just so much smoother. So, and I would say we're both like that, and we are quite to the point. And I would say that, you know, if you're someone that gets offended easily or doesn't see the logic in things or kind of the end goal. I mean, I'm not saying we're robots and we don't have emotional intelligence. You know, we understand people and how to communicate. But in terms of within our team and what we do together, you've got to kind of have thick skin, be logical, and be able to be concise, articulate yourself well, listen, and get shit done, basically.
Yeah, you've got to be open to, like, you've got to be able to criticize each other if you think something's not right with each other. You've got to be able to say to Daunte, look, I don't think this is right, and he's going to be able to take it and think like, all right, I see where you're coming from, and talk about it. Rather than, that's when you see business partners just like falling out, or one person wants to go down one route and they're not speaking to the other person and stuff. So it looks like you've got a good little balance of both.
For
So
sure.
we'll move on, talking a little bit about your business itself. So you're focusing strength and conditioning. Is it specifically focused on footballers, or do you kind of do general public as well?
Well, with that, our niche is within footballers. When we see athletes, we want to really clamp down on footballers, but we do look after the general populations as well.
Yeah.
It was something that we've discovered that we needed to clamp down on. I think we kind of funneled through from athletes as a broader spectrum into footballers. Reasons being is because it's the most popular sport, not just only in our region, but kind of in the country. So there's a big market there. It's something that we've both played, so we understand it from a playing aspect. It's something that we both actively watch and enjoy. So, you know, the interest is there, and it's a, you know, it's a pretty cool thing. Especially when as experience when it comes down to us working with the players. There'd be nothing worse for me to be able to try and talk to someone physically about a sport that I've never played or a sport that I don't really watch or enjoy. So this came from a combination of those kind of aspects. And then Andy kind of leads heavily a lot on the S&C stuff. I kind of call him a whiz at that, really. So anything that comes from any kind of technical stuff, Andy's your go-to guy. And I think is quite valuable in that aspect.
Yeah. Something you touched on there, I literally did a podcast with someone last week who's he's a coach, he's a football specific one-on-one coach, and he's kind of came through university, that he went from that side away. Do you think that coaches, not just at the top level, but just at any level, need to kind of play the game to almost have the right? Because I feel there's a lot of coaches that have played the game, but they can be horrendous coaches at the same time. But then from the background of like coaches coming from university, working their way up the ranks, like you see a lot of like young up and coming coaches are the same. They haven't really played the game like at a decent level, but they're decent coaches and they know how to manage people. Do you feel like it's necessary, or do you feel like it's just an advantage in general that if you've played the game at a decent level?
It's a really good question, that one. I'm sure Andy will have something to say about it, but from my perspective personally, I won't necessarily say that you need to play the sport, because I've come across great. I think to be a good coach for me personally, I'm more on a soft side of the spectrum. So as long as you're able to get the best out of someone and you can learn the technical stuff, you don't necessarily need to have played the sport to do that. But I do think it can give you a bit of an advantage, especially to help with buy-in. One of the things that you see is, for example, I'm touching more from an actual, technical coach here, but you look at, when a new coach comes into a club who's not won anything before, the players automatically assume, why is he here? Especially when you're coaching players who have maybe won something. But then if you've got a world-renowned coach who's recognised around the world who comes in, it kind of makes you think, okay, he must know what he's on about slightly, if you know what I mean. So that's my perspective on it. But I'm sure Andy's probably got something to share on
that. So it's obviously such a multifactorial thing being a good coach. There's so much that goes into it, as Daunte said. There's more than just that. So it's not like an absolute essential. But what I would say is from a gym perspective, open a spreadsheet, write down for an athlete that you're going to give them 5 sets of 20. Yeah, cool. I'll give them 2 minutes rest in between each set. Go and do that 5 sets of 20 yourself to failure and see how it feels. Because you need to understand how that feels.
Yeah.
Before you go and prescribe that for someone or do that for someone. So I think it's the same. It's the same with sport. You know, you're gonna. It's the same. So it's also like telling your best mate, get rid of that girl. You know, she's no good for you. But when you've got the emotional investment in that girl and you understand how it feels and all that kind of stuff, it's different. So from the perspective of just a kind of general law of understanding things, it's always an advantage to obviously have played. And then obviously, if you've played, you kind of understand the perspective of being coached and what you did like and didn't like. But again, with what Daunte said about kind of skinning the game and having a demonstrated track record of accomplishing things. I mean, I don't really need to say much more than what Daunte said there, but obviously that's a factor as well.
Yeah, no, I massively agree with that. Like, I feel like it is an advantage initially, but like I said before, I've had coaches in the past who have played like high level, like I'm talking really high level, and they either just think they're better than other people are because they've achieved something they deserve this initial amount of respect, and they just can't deal with it. Like, they're not very good at man management. But then I have coaches who maybe haven't. Maybe it's grounding them a little bit, having to work their way up the ranks a little bit as well. I don't know, but I feel there's sides to both sort of story. But it was nice to hear your opinion on it anyway. It's good to get a different perspective. So moving on a little bit about strength conditioning for footballers, which is something that I wanted to touch on. How important do you feel, like especially over the last few years, how important has it become for footballers specifically to focus on the strength conditioning side of the game?
Well, with this, let's look at how in the last 10, 15 years, how fast the game's gone. Players being able to cover more distances than in the world of running more, they're a lot more stronger, they're tracking more higher speeds. And it's generally made for more exciting football, hasn't it? You've seen teams like Liverpool now who have been able to basically outrun a lot of other teams just through to being fitter. And I think when you link that into how the game's changed, how other coaches from across the world have brought in implements of S&C, how it's become more prominent into general populations as well, has meant that you're able to see players who are able to be a bit more robust now. Take, for example, Ronaldo, for say. Not everything he does is what we call S&C. Some of it is pretty useless, but in terms of how well he's managed to look after his body over the last 10, 15 seasons, how many times has he been injured? I can count on a hand if you know what I mean. It's more of a direct, stronger, fast, explosive game now, and the players who are able to demonstrate that to the top end tend to be the ones who do better. Not saying that it's all down to the S&C. Some of this may be genetic with a lot of these players. Look at Mbappe, for example. Ridiculously quick, ridiculously fast. You can't say that's just down to S&C, but I'm sure it's some sort of work in terms of mechanics has been implemented to tweak certain things that makes them look quick over a yard. So definitely see how it's something that for that top end of the game, for me to say is getting there. I still think a lot of players need convincing a little bit. I mean, you've got to think it's still only like a 20-year-old thing. It's a lot of these players that have come through now are about the same age as S&C. And I think only when it started to be implemented into the grassroots academy level where they can grow up with it is when we'll see it really kick into action. But it's when you go down to your lower end of the game in terms of your lower league football where it's probably not financed as well. You're not able to get the full-time stuff in. I think that's then those players who can't readily access it need to be really looking to invest in it, especially as it's a bit of a scrap heap at that level. Just to keep your body fresh, you want to be not getting injured in your season, just to give yourself that little bit of a chance. And by doing that is when you really need to be looking after your body. Yeah,
I was going to touch on about the injury sort of thing. So it could be genetic, like you said, but I found that throughout my time when I was playing, the training load and the gym sessions were the same for everybody, which I feel, well, not just in terms of positions and stuff like that, doesn't really benefit you that well, but different people can manage different loads better. So for myself, I was very injury prone, and I felt like I couldn't deal with the amount of training load that was put in front of me. Whereas there's other lads who you see who just, they maybe don't. I know there's lads I can name in the top of my head who didn't do any S&C but just stayed injury free, and they were the stiffest, weakest. Like, they were reasonably fit, but just they didn't really do much extra. But I feel that S&C coaches, well, I'll ask you, how do you kind of manage if you get an athlete who comes in who maybe has a history of certain sort of amount of injuries, he's training this many days a week, how would you kind of program his sessions, working around his weaknesses and stuff in areas that he needs to work on, and then compared to someone who maybe trains the same amount but hasn't really had that history, if you get what I mean? I probably haven't worded that very well, but how would you kind of...
Andy the Wiz, I think this one's for you.
The Wiz.
I mean, again, it just depends on building a background for that player, and it depends what age and on what part of their kind of physical journey and their career journey in football you are involved with them at. Because if they've had a long line of injuries, untangling them to why the first one happened, or why the one happened after that, or what happened after that, is going down a bit of a rabbit hole. Yeah. So unless you pick someone up injury-free at a young age, and you can see kind of, let's say you do a movement screen, and you can see kind of any, or even just throughout sessions, or even during gameplay, you can see any kind of discrepancies in their movement, where you can then begin to kind of work on that. It's quite hard to untangle that and figure it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what age you bring them in at. So yeah, it highly depends on the individual. But if you do have someone in that's coming with a long line of injuries, it's about understanding those injuries and the context behind them, how they happened. You know, like how they happened on the pitch might help work backwards into why something really happened. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to prevent injuries from happening on the field.
Yeah.
So it's not just the case of I'm going to do a movement screen, or you know, he's got a little bit of chronic ankle instability, or got a little bit of knee valgus, or she's got a little bit of, you know, knee valgus. It depends on how that informs movement on the field as well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of that's how you get a good transfer, in kind of in training and injury prevention. So it needs to be driven by context on the field as well, not just doing a kind of isolated gym-based assessment, which doesn't really actually predict injury. You know, you've got to go deeper than that.
So
if that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. I was going to say, do you actually go out and watch like the lads and stuff on the pitch sometimes and assess the movement, or do you just purely do the gym-based stuff?
It depends, because like with Manchester Player Development, the football academy we're in partnership with, their strength and conditioning is field-based.
All right.
And we are there, and we do their strength and conditioning before they go into their field work.
Yeah.
So there, you know, we more often than not, we can stay and watch them, and we can have to take, you know, mental note. Well, mainly mental notes. But you know, if we've got athletes that are in one-to-one, and again, this isn't just tied back into S&C. This ties back into the business side of relationships and keeping clients happy, where Daunte's ears will perk up for sure. Actually caring about them as people, and not just going to watch them for the sake of S&C, which is something that we would do and we do plan on doing as well more often as we get more time. You know, Daunte, I'm sure, will say on that going to watch them, you know, spending a Saturday morning is valuable.
Yeah, 100%. So talking about injuries, what sort of the common injury? I don't know if how old roughly are the age groups that you kind of deal with? Are the younger athletes, or do you deal with all ages?
More younger, but a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. What are the common injuries that you see kind of coming in, or common weaknesses? I shouldn't say injuries. Maybe at that age, they probably don't get them as much. But injuries or weaknesses that you see for the young athletes?
With the youth athletes, it's kind of the sport doesn't matter as much, especially when they're not specializing in one sport massively. So your typical ones that you're going to see is stuff like Osgood-Slaz.
Yeah.
Where like, I mean, I know that, you know, people are going to hear that and go, yeah, I know about that anyway, but like, what else you want me to tell you? I'm not going to make up something to tell you that you've not heard it before, because it's not true. Like, those are the kind of things that you're going to see in athletes that are maturing, going through growth spurts, putting on weight quickly, and the length of the limbs are growing quite quickly. So that kind of affects their movement competency, technically how they move, how they absorb force, how they apply force. So with that, you kind of have to adjust the training that they do in terms of the amount of force they're actually absorbing, how they do that. You have to slow things down a little bit, especially in terms of force absorption and decelerations. Decelerations are a really intense action in football. They're way more intense than any other movement and more intense than accelerations. So you have to be careful about kind of the eccentric load that you place on the players, and how you adjust that. Really, it's just going back to your basic principles. You have to slow things down a little bit, drop the intensity, focus on movement competency before you kind of increase the intensity and the speed and the velocity of things again. But in terms of more senior players, in the literature, the main kind of weaknesses, or kind of where one of the most common injuries, which is like non-contact ACLs, where that will happen a lot, is in defensive pressing, balancing on the stance leg after a kick, and landing after a header. So like those three specific situations have been shown in the literature to be like three real big contributors to non-contact ACL injury, and they're all usually kind of unpredictable and fast movements. I mean, kicking on your stance leg is a little bit more static, whereas the other two are dynamic. But I mean, defensive pressing, if you're accelerating to attackers and then putting in a challenge, or decelerating to stand up to them, you're absorbing a lot of force. Balance leg after kicking, isometrically, you're absorbing a lot of force, and landing after heading on your leg, a high velocity, unpredictable movement, you're absorbing a lot of force in unpredictable positions.
Yeah.
And they all kind of link back to valgus as well again. So it's kind of controlling forces in unpredictable ways at high speeds in these kind of specific instances is going to be a big one in terms of injuries like ACL. And then you've got like hamstring strains and tears. It's just protecting the hamstrings with proper training. So not just gym-based training, not just RDLs, not just Nordics, frequent sprinting, but also good sprinting, which is harder to do with like elite seniors, because what they've got ingrained in them in terms of motor patterns when they're sprinting, it's been ingrained for a while. So to kind of coach that out of them is just going to be, is it more effort than what it's going to be worth for the reward? Yeah. Whereas with younger athletes that are going through kind of maturation and they're a bit gangler and they need some refinement in terms of mechanics, and the benefit from kind of learning general mechanics that you might see a track athlete do. They're probably going to benefit that, especially in terms of protection on the hamstrings as they grow into a senior player. Where it doesn't matter if it's a male or female player. So yeah, I would say probably those two things to kind of summarize that. So yeah, those would be three specific actions. Like defensive pressing, kicking on your stance leg, landing after heading. But that then points back to deceleration, absorbing force, unpredictable positions, high velocities, and control of the knee joint in valgus. From hip to knee to ankle.
Yeah. Is there any exercises that, like, I can never say there's like one or two exercises that are going to fix, or these are the exercises you need to do, but just ones off your head that just especially for young athletes, like simple ones, like, I don't know, because I'm a big fan of the re-effective split squat, any sort of single leg movement, especially for knee stability, because I follow a bit of, Mike Boyle. I follow a bit of his stuff, and he's big on single leg stuff. Is there anything, especially for like your ACL injuries and your hamstring injuries, for young athletes that they can kind of implement at a young age to kind of take forward?
Yeah, first of all, Mike's an absolute legend, so that you shouted him out. He's a good guy, and me and Daunte definitely look up to him a lot, not just from a kind of S&C perspective, but from building a franchise gym perspective. But anyway, yeah, back to your question. Again, you've got general and specific ones, and we are real big on context-driven stuff as well as general stuff. So I mean, yeah, in terms of general strengthening and general preparation. Especially with the youth athletes, the first thing is going to be competency. So being able to perform those movements correctly, like a split squat, a lunge, especially where deceleration is concerned, a stationary lunge where you step out, absorb the force in a forward, like antero-posterior direction, and push back up, is going to be useful. Again, with single leg work, you kind of need to progress to that. So you could go, again, from learning how to squat, to split squat, to then rail for elevated split squat, to then, true single leg stuff like pistol squats and skater squats. That's going to help with kind of general strength at your hips and knees, with heavier loads. But again, that's a slow movement and it's not unpredictable. So then you can go to kind of like, closed chain deceleration, so like sprinting out 5 meters and decelerating in a set position with your feet kind of in an athletic stance. Then you can go to like split stance. So you're decelerating in lunge positions, decelerating in lateral positions, which can then tie into change of direction. So you can kind of go off on tangents. But I get another one that would be useful for, heading and landing would be collisions in the air with someone, heading and then trying to land as safely as possible. But again, tying back into that with your general stuff, that would go into like death drops. That would be like general S&C stuff. But again, it's not as unpredictable as what you would see, in football. So we try and incorporate that aspect into there. So like, I'll pick out one specific drill that we do, which is a lateral shoulder box battle. So we'll have, 2 players stand shoulder to shoulder. We'll put all the weight into each other. One of us will say go, and they will just use their body weight, apply force through the feet, through their ankles, through the hips, and through the knees into the ground to try and push the other person out. Yeah. It's fast paced, it's unpredictable, it gets them in unpredictable positions, it's fun. Because it's competitive, they put a lot of intent and effort into it. And it's really that kind of stuff that can have a bigger transfer beyond the general gym stuff.
Yeah, I think there's probably more of a buy-in for young lads as well when there's that competitive aspect. You're like, right, I'm going to shove you to the ground sort of thing with your mate. Like, rather than just getting them to like step off a block, and like as a young lad, you just be thinking like, what's this doing? Like, obviously they don't know the science behind it, but doing something like that, it's definitely more buy-in. And then you talked about like doing that rather than just the box step up. Like, you can shoot, like, purely focus on like, right, what am I doing here? I'm absorbing the landing when I jump off this box. Whereas in a game, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about like heading the ball or like, what's this lad? Is he going to come and smash me, sort of thing? You're not thinking about that landing. So exactly. Like when I was doing my ankle rehab after I had operation, like the physio, we did all the stuff like through the cones and stuff, hopping and landing. And he's like, right, I'm going to throw the ball here at any point. So the whole time I was thinking like, he's going to throw the ball. But it's just about learning how to do all the exercise that you can do, but without actually consciously thinking about it, like focusing on the game. So that's definitely some good points, definitely there. I was going to touch on comparing, so training off-season for, well, we'll say young athletes, that's what you specialise in, most of the athletes are. So comparing in-season to off-season athletes, what are some of the things that you would focus on? So like now is probably a perfect time to talk about it because we're in the off-season. So off-season moving into pre-season, then into obviously the main season. What are some of the things you'd focus on?
It doesn't really change too much for youth athletes. It's kind of a general progression model. So again, we get them to. So the first stage is 1, move well. 2, move more. 3, move load. So move heavy load. 4, move fast.
Yeah.
So and then within that we do that for kind of each kind of movement progression and quality, and they all work backwards from qualities on the field. So like speed, acceleration, deceleration, change of direction, agility. So like each session will have a main aim of improving one of those, so the players exactly understand what it is they're doing and why it's important and how it's going to improve their performance on the field. And there'll be some context specific stuff and some general stuff in there. But yeah, it's just literally progressing them with movement competency and intensity, so that when they kind of have eyes on them from academies and stuff, or they go onto the next stage of their career, when they get into the gym or on the field, they move well, and then coaches can prioritize intensity and driving adaptation rather than trying to teach them things they should already know. Yeah. Whereas with like seniors, it definitely will be more periodized. I mean, don't get me wrong, we don't just put the youth athletes into a boxed program and then this is it, you're doing this. It will be adjusted where necessary. But in terms of the seniors, in the preseason, we usually do more kind of linear based periodization, which means that we kind of go from general extensive work to specific intensive work towards the start of the season. So like start of the preseason, you might be doing more like aerobic work, general gym stuff, squats, lunges, lateral squats, Romanian deadlifts, that kind of stuff. And then as it goes on, you might actually be finishing just before the preseason ends with like top speed work that's real brief and intense, small-sided games. The gym work will mainly be like, plyos and specific strength exercises, probably more on the field. And then kind of during the season, we're just mindful of kind of the different times of season. So like the start of the season, they're gonna be fresh and at the first. So we don't really have to adjust too much there. We'll just kind of bring the volume down a little bit to account for games. Depends how much game time they get though. And then towards the Christmas break, we're just mindful of reintroducing them back in steadily because they've had a little bit of time off. And then towards the end of the season, we're just mindful of kind of accumulated fatigue. So basically with that, we just kind of, what we do is we just adjust the priority of the qualities that we're training throughout the season. So like at the end of the season, when there's accumulated fatigue, injuries might be a bit more of a risk. We're not going to do loads of heavy eccentric work or high volume work. Yeah. We're not going to focus heavily on decelerations, especially when they happen so often in the game anyway, in small-sided games and training. We're probably going to dose some intensive top speed work to protect the hamstrings and keep them moving quick. Probably some agility work, and then probably mainly some brief, fast-moving, concentric strength work to keep the strength up, because the relative strength might suffer a little bit because of the fatigue and stuff like that. The speed and agility might not as much because they've done a full season of sprinting and trying to be agile during games, basically. It's just being mindful of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So how would you, just as an example, we could catch you on the spot, how would you lay out a week? So say it's not towards the end of the season, but like start of the season, but they're only playing one game a week. So the game's on a Saturday. How would you kind of pan out the week? Not just in terms of training, but in terms of gym program. Because I get that question quite a lot. Because I get people asking about, because I'm from a football background, how would you set out your training week? Like Monday, what would you do? Tuesday, what would you do? When would you have your day off? Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But obviously, you're the expert on this one, so I don't know what my opinion would be different to yours.
It's a tough one because we're a private strength and conditioning company, and depending on their level and what they do with the club, we might only be with them once a week or maybe twice a week. Could be 3 times a week. We don't know. It depends on what we and they decide is the kind of best decision for them, which Daunte would be, quite a big part of, especially in terms of how feasible it is for us. So it's a difficult one to answer, especially when there's also an issue with stakeholders, especially with youth athletes. So like your stakeholders are going to be like, the club's a stakeholder. If they play any other sport for any other teams, they're a stakeholder. We're a stakeholder. So like there needs to be communication between stakeholders to make sure you're doing what's best and it's in the best interest of that athlete. Not even the athlete, that human, that person, which can be difficult sometimes, especially like if you're asking an S&C coach what an athlete's been doing with them, or if you're asking for like some GPS data or something, you might find yourself trying to chase up an answer that you're not really going to get. So that can always be difficult. But let's say we had let's say we had free reign, and it was kind of as we please. If they've got a game on a Saturday, they're probably going to do some active recovery on a Sunday. Monday, it's subjective. Again, like you said, some people come in feeling beat up, some people come in fresh. So it depends on how they're feeling. But there we could go through some kind of more movement competency type stuff. So the intensity is a little bit lower. They might end up, reviewing some sort of game stuff or doing some light training with the team. So we might go through something a little bit more technical, working on movement competency, less kind of neural demand and less physically fatiguing, but kind of refining movement patterns more. And then Tuesday we can up it a little bit so that we'll be fresh there. So we might do some top speed work, some acceleration work, keep it brief but keep it intense, and everything we do. So that, again, it's always aimed back at a specific quality. So if we do a top speed session, especially if we only have an athlete in for an hour, we don't do just speed. We might warm up. We'll do some general kind of closed mechanics, which might be like 1 or 2 exercises. Then we'll do like some general top speed sprints. Then we might do a context specific rep or 2 with kind of a football or another player. And then after that, we'll do like a plyo that ties into top speed or a ballistic exercise, then a specific strength exercise and a general one. And then we might drop in a little bit of body if we've got the time, and then some either general or specific core work. And again, the ratio of that just differs depending on the time of season. But you might see that at the start of the week, and then moving more towards the end of the week, you might, maybe Thursday, you might see a little bit more strength work. Friday would be a drop off. So even Thursday with the strength work, it would still be brief. Wednesday, you might have a little bit of a higher and intense actual football training session. Thursday might get a little bit of strength work. But again, if we did a top speed session at the start of the week, we might just do kind of an agility session with a little bit of change of direction or deceleration on the Thursday. Friday, it's going to be active recovery or kind of a primer for Saturday. So 1, they're not sore, but 2, they're also kind of in, you can never really call it optimal, but like a state where they're ready to go on Saturday. So like with your priming, you might do, some jumps, some medicine ball throws, stuff like that, just to get the central nervous system firing.
Yeah, I've had loads of different approaches, but I'm kind of with you and doing little bits each day. I've spoke to, I can't remember his name now, but he was on about they've changed the system over the last few years at a professional team from going like, we're literally going to have 1 gym session here, 1 gym session here, and the rest is just going to be football stuff, to doing little bits each day. And like you said, like focusing on speed stuff, top end stuff the other day, and more like gym based stuff the other day, and then obviously you have like a day off on Wednesday or whatever, and then towards the end of the week you almost like they call it like a peaking in a sense for that game on Saturday, because that's when you need to be fresh. So that's probably the best, because I know lads that they say they like doing this, that and the other before games. What's your opinion on doing like upper body stuff the day before a game? Because I remember our coach, SSC coach, when I was at Newcastle, he was like, no, upper body, nothing before the day before a game. And some lads like to do it. I don't know if it was a mental thing or...
I don't mind it, to be honest. I mean, as long as it doesn't leave you unnecessarily sore, or going, I'm like my back's hurting or my chest is hurting, or it's influencing your movement negatively in some way, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And if the training's appropriately dosed and managed, then you should never come out feeling sore the next day anyway. So I have no issue with that, especially since like it's still going to be somewhat important in battles and duels, especially, we mentioned goalkeepers before as well. Even more, I mean, like you can say even more so for defenders to be strong against attackers, but then attackers need it to be strong against defenders. Yeah. So like, when people talk about individualizing from positions, sometimes it works both ways. So yeah, it's not something like I really have an issue with, to be honest.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't leave them so.
Spot on, mate. Just touch up on about I talked about before about lads who maybe have injuries or something, or maybe like the groin and they have a little bit of Osgood Slatters or whatever. I used to get severs, I think it was called, in the ankles. I used to get that quite a bit. Do you think players should have a right? I know when they're young, it's obviously quite hard when they're like 11, 12, 13 and stuff. It's hard for them to go and say to a coach, look, I feel like I need to back off the intensity here because I'm getting these aches and pains. Do you feel it should be more accepted rather than coaches? Because I felt like when I was young, if I said that to a coach, he'd just be like, well, stop fanning about. You don't have like the mentality or whatever, given that excuse. Do you feel like maybe they're at a young age, so maybe the parents should come towards the coach? Do you think that should be a bit more of an open approach rather than be like, right, because the team's doing this, he needs to do that. And if he's not fit to do that, he's injured. Sort of thing. Do you think it needs a little bit? And it's a tough question.
I think you need to know the player. Like you need to know. And Daunte got a real good grasp of the players at Manchester Player Development and what they're like, and whether he thinks they're bullshitting or being for real with what they're saying.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on the player. Do they usually take part in S&C? Do they care? Do they ask questions? Which is partly your job, to make them kind of want to do that stuff. But like, do they, even when you try, do they take part? Do they show willingness? Do they show interest? Are they usually a little bit of a faker or like a little bit of a politician with things,
Yeah, you get one or two of them, don't you? Something.
yeah, like or like a little bit of a fairy. You know, it depends on what they're like. But I mean, you're not the mum or the dad. You know, you're not there to tell them what to do. I mean, you can only guide their decisions, and if they're going to play anyway or decide not to play anyway, all you can do is guide them. I'm not going to waste unnecessary time. You know, it's like the saying that if you argue with an idiot, that's not going to change your mind, then you know you're an idiot as well.
Yeah,
So
no, you're wasting your own time, aren't you?
it's just about judging, kind of, is it worth spending the time on, and what is this player going to decide to end up doing, regardless of what I kind of suggest anyway.
Yeah, you do know your players. You know the ones who actually like do graft, and if there's a problem, like it's like, whoa, what's wrong with him? Like this isn't normal, kind of thing. So I think and then like you said, you do get your people who are just like, oh, they fall over and they hurt the hand or something, they graze themselves on the astroturf, and that's them injured for 2 weeks and they don't want to come back. So I think you do know them sort of players. So definitely some good points there. So last little thing, and then I've got 3 little questions which I think you've had a little look at. So last one we talked about. Me and Daunte briefly talked about before the podcast about the psychological side of the game, especially for young athletes who are maybe getting to the age of either like 15, 16 to get the scholarship, and then maybe don't get that contract and they maybe fall out of love with the game, or they find it hard to find another team and they have to drop out of the game, or even at the other end when they get the scholarship and it gets to that professional contract time and maybe it doesn't quite get there, like they don't quite get that contract or things don't happen to them. Is there anything advice-wise, because Daunte, you've been through a similar thing, I've been through a similar thing, like any advice or any things that you've experienced that have kind of helped you, or feel like, is there anything more that needs to be done?
I think definitely get that plan B and even that plan C scheduled.
Yeah.
I think it's naive, and it comes down to parents a little bit. It's naive to think that with football you've got a chat. Well, I don't think you can go into it thinking that you have it guaranteed that you're going to make it. Definitely have all the enthusiasm in the world to do it, but just look at the stats and the figures. It's very, very rare for players to be able to get in the fortunate position to be able to get a professional contract. So there needs to be that safety net, and I think kids need to be exposed to other avenues, whether that's education. Sports usually the easier dropout, isn't it? Because it still gives you that kind of it fills that void quite well, but you definitely need to give them other avenues, whether it's other sports, whether it's education, whether it's getting them into a job, just something at least that they can understand and grasp, so that they can continue to build a skill set. As early this morning, I spoke to a sports psychologist where I'll flip it. There's players who are retiring who for 10, 15 years, their identity has been a footballer, a sportsman, a top-end athlete. And it's intense when you've got that year in, year out, I've got to be the best. And when you lose that, and there's people still associate themselves with a club, or I used to play this, or I used to play that, or when I was 16, I was playing for X, Y, Z, but I didn't quite make it. If that comes into the first topic, when someone asks you, who are you, what do you do? And if that's something that I feel that comes into your head, then you need to kind of lose that identity as such. You need to become almost like a new person. You need to have the new you, the new skill set, the new something. And hopefully, I think clubs should try and do a little bit better as well in managing this, because you see it all the time where there's articles published where there's players that have been under 21s, under 23s at top clubs where you think that they might potentially be able to land in a lower league side, but then they're absolutely fall off the wayside. And I think they've got to be doing a little bit more, especially for some players that have been at these clubs from being a boy into nearly going into a man, and they're just dropping off. I think that's a bit of the cold side to the game that I think he's looking at, because I think we need to move away from looking at these, these men and these women as investments as such, and start looking into the people and the human side of it, because there's a lot of damage that can be created there if these kids aren't exposed to the right people. So definitely looking to try and basically to just make sure that there's that safety net underneath, and that should almost be just as important as being able to make it, in my opinion.
I see it a lot, even at Premier League teams. Players like leave and the struggle, like trialing, like that's another topic of conversation. Trying to trial places is just an absolute nightmare. Like I talked about it with my mate in a podcast. Like you go down places, they say, right, we want you down for a week. This, that, and we're looking for a goalkeeper. And you get like a few days in, they're like, like we don't have we don't have the money for you to sign and stuff like that. And they're just like, well, you've just wasted a week of my life there. Like trying to trial is ridiculous, and you just end up losing, like you lose the love for it when you go in all these places and you have been at like a good level and you know what you're capable of, and then you're getting these reasons and maybe you're dropping confidence, and when your confidence drops, your performance drops, and then you like end up losing belief in yourself. Like I was in the same situation. Like when I was playing in Scotland, I lost my confidence loads, and I was just like a few years ago, like I was at this level, now I'm down here, which is like you said, it's an identity thing. Like it's almost an ego thing, which I think a lot of people who have played at a high level they have to kind of lose it. And it took me a while to lose that ego. Like it did take us probably a solid year after I left Newcastle to lose that ego. That was the first thing. Like, oh yeah, I was at Newcastle for 11 years, but you're a new person. Nobody cares about that when you leave, especially when you drop down levels. Nobody cares, and it is a tough reality. They try and make a career in the game when you've been at the top level doesn't mean that you've got the right to like, right, I've played here, go to another team. Doesn't make you a right to be number one or like starting your opposition sort of thing. It's very tough. Of course. But we'll we could go on and talk about that for another 25 minutes. But we'll finish off. We'll finish off with 3 questions. So I'll ask you both. I'll let you go one at a time. So first question is 3 people, past or present, who you'd like to invite round for dinner. Anybody?
Okay, I'll start. Me, Jay-Z. I'm a big Jay-Z fan. From his story of how he started to where he is now, I just think that's absolutely phenomenal. So that's a brand I'd like to pick. Elon Musk, second person. Revolution. I think what he's managed to do, even this week with the recent stuff, his mind's just somewhere else. And again, that's another brain I'd like to pick. And then to lighten up a little bit, Kevin Hart. I think he's successful in his own right, but he's also hilarious.
I just listened to his Joe Rogan podcast the other day.
Yeah, see, if you've heard that, it literally gave me the energy that I could go run through a wall. So I think, again, that's another person who I'd like to have on my contact list and do to sit down and have a conversation. So they're my 3.
So let's go on, Andy.
Daunte has some good ones there.
Did you get sent the notes or not? Did you get time to prep, or you just come off the cuff?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure if you were off the cuff or not.
Daunte sent them across, but I didn't know what he had chose. So first one, we'll go with an equivalent to Jay-Z, which I didn't just pick it because of that, but 50 Cent. Similar thing to Daunte with Jay-Z. The guy's just a machine. He's gone from like one of the roughest places in the world in terms of like gang violence to being one of the most kind of revolutionary like hip hop artists of the early 2000s, and then he's gone on to write books, which are very good books. He's got one called The 50th Law, which is kind of a second book to 48 Laws of Power, which is a classic. And then going on to making shows like Power and stuff. And I think it's just a fun, controversial character. It makes me laugh. So 50 Cent. Second one is Naval, who is more of kind of a recent person that's come to like the public eye on social media and stuff like that. Don't really know that much about him, but he seems like to have a conversation with, he would leave you with a lot of wisdom that would help you find a little bit more peace and happiness without relying on kind of external things, which is cool. And then last one I would go with is this is a tough one. I'm stuck between 2. Conor McGregor. I was stuck between him and someone else, but I'll go Conor McGregor. Again, just because I like enjoying myself and just having a laugh and having fun and laughing. I think Conor McGregor's funny, but again, it also has some interesting lessons and stories. Yeah.
Legend. He's been picked for a few times. I think that people have asked, but he's a legend. Like, I love him. Second question is 3 people you'd want to train with. So it could be gym related or football related.
Andy, you can go first with this one.
Arnold, just because it's Arnold, you can't not pick him. Is that?
Yeah.
Not not saying he's going to talk a load of sense to me in terms of training, but like the guy's just a legend. He's like, I'd pay to train with Arnold, just have a session with him. Second one, Kevin Hart. Again, like what Daunte said about him having a good vibe. The guy's just hilarious. Getting in a session with him and just having a good time would be fun. And then I'd have to get an athlete in there because I'd want a real competitive session. So with that one, I'd have to go with probably LeBron James, just because you see him in the gym quite a lot on social media. Seems like he's got good energy. And it'd probably be a fun competitive session with a lot of hard work. So yeah, I'll let Daunte go.
Love that. Nice picks, man. I think for me, The Rock. I picked The Rock's because the guy's just been cool since I was a kid. Even he's absolutely amazing. The fact he's changed his body again and his work rate and everything about him is just energy. I love it. A guy called Elliot Hulse, who's kind of, when I was getting
strong.
into the gym.
Yeah, I know Elliot Hulse.
Strong man. Bit of a funny character, but he, again, was one of the reasons why I started to lift weights. So he's the second person. And then for the first reason that Andy said, Arnold, I just think is one of the cornerstones of bodybuilding. It is. So
yeah,
I think just to have a session with him, just to see what it's like and see him in the flesh would be absolutely a life-changing experience. So
yeah, it'd be ridiculous training with him back, especially back in these like Olympia days when he bodybuilded. Like, I think his sessions were like 3.5, 4 hours long. But he'd be there kind of well. Right, last one. One thing you said to yourself 5 years ago. One little bit of advice.
Well, what I said is I think I keep it simple. I think 5 years ago I was kind of in a rush to get things happening too quick, and I still probably am. But what I probably tell myself is that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Just enjoy it. And I think it's especially 5 years ago I was 18. It's a prime stage of part of my life, so probably just enjoy it a little bit more and just say yes to a lot more things that I said no to. But that's probably just about it for me. Simple as that.
Yeah, great advice. That. Go on, Andy.
I was going to say the same thing, but from a different perspective. Just enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
Just have fun. Like you live once, and time is precious. You don't get it back. Like even me saying this right now. Like me just saying 5 seconds ago, enjoy yourself, and everything else I've just said is gone. That time in existence doesn't come back. So, just do shit you enjoy. And if you're not enjoying something, stop doing it and go and do something else. And just be happy.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm all about that. 100% all about that. But now, it's been a pleasure having you guys on. Do you want to shout out your social media, company social media, and your own social media as well, where people can find you?
So you can find our site, our website at www.aestheticathletes.co.uk, Instagram, Aesthetic Athletes. My personal Instagram and Twitter are at Instagram _Daunte and Twitter just _Daunte. It's a bit confusing, but yeah, that's another story. And Andy, you can look after yourself. I think.
Yeah, so Twitter, we're at AA Conditioning. Just because we can't fit aesthetic athletes in. Boycott Twitter for that. Facebook will just say aesthetic athletes. Yeah. And then Instagram, my personal, is where I post a lot more of my training because we keep things obviously more professional on the Instagram, is @AA_Andy. And that's because someone's took AA_Andy, which is an inactive account. But it's not been deleted, which is why Daunte has the same thing. It's a nightmare.
That's just this trouble with Instagram. If you're not on it straight away, you lose it. But cheers, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you very much. So everyone, make sure you go and follow the page as well to put some decent content out. And the online, what's it called? Database. That's the one that you've just put on is pretty decent. So get it. It's only like it's 99p, isn't it, at the minute?
Less than £1, mate. It's 99p for your first month, $4.99 after that.
That's the one. So
get on it.
All right, cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Have a good day. See ya.